Hi, everyone. We have a fantastic session lined up for you today in this week's Grad Clinic. As many of you know, this is the chance to get your questions answered, your problems troubleshooted, as we collectively work together to try to support each other to deal with some of the most common challenges and pitfalls that you face as grads. And for those of you who don't know me, I'm Professor David Stuckler. And I had a very rocky ride of my own in grad school, and that's really what prompted me to create Fast Track Grad. Just before I go into that, I just want to check that the stream is uploaded and working properly. So I'm using a new piece of kit. Yeah, it looks like it is very good. I see several of you joining. I'm just going to write a welcome into Facebook. You have to get Facebook permission to share to the stream. For those of you tuning in from YouTube and LinkedIn, that goes automatically. But Facebook has fortunately been upping its privacy game. So for me to share your name officially here, you've got to send that through. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Professor David Stuckler. I'm a professor at Bocconi in Milan. Before that, I've been a professor at Harvard University, Oxford, and Cambridge. But it didn't start out so easy for me. I'm a first generation grad student. I started out in a small school in Texas. And so none of my family had gone to grad school. They didn't even know what I was doing at the time. They said, well, why don't you go work or do something useful for the real world? And I had a bumpy road along the way. I just wasn't getting the support, mentorship I needed. And I nearly flunked out one semester, dropped out in another. It was only after a lot of hardship and toiling that I managed to find a mentor who really took me under his wing, showed me the ropes, and helped me publish my first paper. And that opened up tremendous career doors and avenues for me, helped me get to Yale, helped me go on to do a PhD at Cambridge University, and ultimately start out on the tenure track at Harvard. And it's one of the reasons I created Fast Track Grad, because so many of my students have just been suffering, have not been getting the support they need, just like I did. And just with the right, simple, easy tweaks, you too can have a smooth, easy ride to do the things you need to do to succeed, and especially to publish. And that's one of the things in Fast Track Grad that I really want, an open access, democratic community, so that I'm not just passing on like I used to the inside secrets that help me to publish and do well to my students at Harvard and Oxford, but to make it available to you all over the world. So it's not just the preserve of the elite few. So I'm really passionate about open access, really passionate about helping grads, and super excited because our fall cohort of students who have come in to Fast Track are just now getting their first papers published. You'll see a post I just did in the Facebook group today on how to really win at revising your paper in an R&R. Just got the great news today. We got another one accepted to a high impact journal. And all this material is completely 100% open access, completely free for you. So take advantage of it. Now, we have several great questions coming this week that I want to cover. One of those I want to talk about is the importance of having a clear conceptual framework. And I'm going to talk about a tool called a DAG. Fun to say, but really an indispensable tool to help you stay organized and clarify your logic, and also for you to get better feedback from your supervisors. So I'm going to talk about conceptual frameworks and DAGs. I also have some questions coming from Susan, hopefully, about how to leverage co-authors, how to invite co-authors, how to engage them, how to get the most value out of them. So I want to give you guys a framework for thinking about co-authors. And then we had some other questions about PhD applications. And as ever, pop into the chat questions that you may have so that we can cover them here. This really is 100% your time. And those of you, especially, I like, we've done some live editing sessions when you send me papers that you're working on so that we can troubleshoot those together in this session for the benefit of the entire community, because odds are that there's somebody who's been struggling with that same issue that you've got. So let me dive straight in and talk about conceptual frameworks and DAGs. So this is really one of the most important things for you to get right. And every paper you need, whether it's quantitative, qualitative, lit review, needs to have this. And one of the things about research is the world's very complex. It can be very easy to start getting lost, to feel like you don't have clear direction. And that conceptual framework is really going to help keep things tethered and keep you on track. So let me talk to you a little bit about what I mean. I think the best way is rather than tell you about this, but to actually go through and draw you an example. So I'm going to pull up a whiteboard here, and let me just share my screen and show you. So one student, Brian, helpfully has been sharing some of the areas that he's been working on. And let me see. Oops, that share is just not giving me what I want. 2 seconds. Let me do that again. We want to share the entire screen. There we go. Now this should come up now. Perfect. Okay. And so Brian, for example, was very interested in a topic of media and policing. I'm going to clarify this again. And this is a very common structure in a lot of your research topics in social sciences, natural sciences, across the board. Often you're looking at something that's related, some exposure, some X variables, something on the left-hand side. There are different fields have different ways of talking about this, and something on the right-hand side. So I find it really helpful if you can connect, right, the something that might be a causal factor on one side to something that's an outcome on the other side, and that helps keep things neat and tidy for you. And so where Brian was struggling a little bit was writing a literature review on media and crime. And if you just look at that, there's such a big, rich discussion. Especially in the U.S. right now, it brings in Black Lives Matter, brings in lots of cases of things high-level leaders have said, like Barack Obama, other presidents moving policy in different directions, and you can really start to feel lost. So I always recommend that you make an outline, and but that doesn't always help either, because sometimes you feel like, well, I don't even know where to begin in the outline. I find it really helpful to work in a zigzag way. So you need to get, if you're starting completely from scratch, you need to get a sense of the lay of the land and understand kind of the boundaries and how big your field is. So if you want to take in a space like what impact does the media have, or what responsibility does the media have for crime? You want to start your literature search to just understand, what do we know and don't know in the space, and different areas could be really important. So you can already, I don't know a lot about this, but by mapping out the causal networks, right, instead of just starting to say, okay, well, media has an impact on crime, our job as scientists is to go a little bit deeper and think about how. So one way can media can impact people's trust in the police. All right, so that's a pretty big one. And maybe not, that can have an impact on crime. Media can also do things like shape attitudes towards violence. Right. So some people think that when they see violence in the media, it makes them more likely to engage in violence themselves. This can lead to crime. Media can also play a responsible role. Perhaps it can help stigmatize violence. Maybe it can also help people understand where to seek help. Um, right? Maybe media also can really shape attitudes towards policy. So, for example, right, if you think about certain types of crime, then maybe it can shape what policies, what things politicians can do, what campaigns they can run on. And you can already see this is really quite broad. You might really need to then think, wow, this is so broad. For me to create a structure and stay organized, I need to narrow this down. So maybe when you think of media as a whole, you need to break this into think of, okay, maybe I need to think of TV media, things like the BBC in the UK or MSNBC here on one side, and think about TV media. Maybe you need to think about social media. What responsibility does Facebook or Twitter or Instagram have? Because you might think that these have quite different effects, different kinds of crime that are debated, right? Maybe you're concerned about certain kinds of crime and outcome. Maybe you're worried about racial inequalities in crime. Maybe here in crime, you're worried about drug crime. That's a certain area. And already what this can help you do is if you have to say you need to do a quantitative paper. It can help you be more refined and focused. Like I would suggest, for example, here, maybe taking one area. Maybe you want to look at, hey, does engagement on Twitter, do people's engagement on Twitter, do people, when they hear about it, does Twitter actually, help people who want to be violent to engage in violence, maybe spreads the information, makes it seem more normal, helps people organize violent groups and crime, and that leads to certain kinds of crime that you could think maybe cyberbullying that's relevant there. So this framework can also be really useful for you guys if you're really wallowing around, you can't find your topic. This can really help you hone in, and just from drawing out the space, you start with something where you feel overwhelmed, like, oh, what's the impact of media on crime? What responsibilities does media have for crime? So no matter how intelligent you are, it's very, very easy to start getting lost in that space. I'm very experienced. I've done this for over 20 years and published over 400 papers in peer-reviewed journals, and I would get completely lost if I didn't take this step. So you've got to do this. And then you can also begin to see how, okay, if I want to structure my literature review, maybe this is what I want to say. Okay, the big domains of interest here on my literature review, I'm going to structure everything. I'm going to start about talking about the role of how media interacts with the police. I'm talking about how media affects violence, how media affects people seeking help and reporting crime, and how media shapes policy, politicians, and can soften the landscape for certain kinds of policies and not others. Maybe on drug crime, the media played a big role in helping overcome opposition to making available, say, clean needles, or maybe the media played a big role through Black Lives Matter and shaping policies to fight racial inequalities. But you need this framework to really get on top of the massive literature that you have. Maybe you want to structure your review to really highlight the key different ways that by summarizing first TV media and then summarizing maybe different social media, you can see actually these different kinds of media have profoundly different effects on crime. So this is what I mean by conceptual framework. I'm just scratching the surface here, but this is indispensable when you do quantitative analysis. This is going to help you understand what things go in your model, what things create biases that you need to adjust for and correct for. And the same principle goes in setting out this causal logic here. The same principles are really going to apply if you do qualitative research as well. So this tool, I didn't call anything, but it's a fancy tool called a DAG, or a directed acyclic graph. So if you really want to impress your friends, you can talk about directed acyclic graphs, but as they're more commonly known, they're just DAGs. Make sure that you have those. So guys, any questions about this? I'm going to stop screen sharing. Do pop those through in the chat. Have you been using conceptual frameworks in setting up your analyses, in doing your literature reviews? Because if you don't, you risk getting lost, confused, and losing time. But even worse, you make it harder for others to understand what you're trying to do and the structure you're going. So for many of you who are doing a PhD, I really like using these frameworks as well to help communicate, well, what's the structure of my chapters? How does my PhD really fit together in a visual, simple route at a glance? The research is complex enough for you to stay organized. You want to simplify without dumbing down, but simplify as much as possible. So guys, let us know in the comments, do you use DAGs? Have they been helpful to you? In if there are ways that they've helped you to organize your literature review or quantitative analysis, let us know. And that often gives a hook for other people in the group who maybe haven't ever used these before, use these tools, integrated them in their own research, gives them a point to reach out to you also for help and mutual support. By the way, many of you guys I know do watch on the replay. So if you are on Team Replay, do comment replay below. Let us know. Put your questions in there, and I always go back after to make sure those get answered for you. Okay, I want to then come to a next set of questions, which I thought was also a really, really good one. That came from Susan, and that's how to engage co-authors. Many of you are publishing for the first time, and you may be uncertain whether you should have co-authors at all, and if so, who should they be? What value can they add? At what point in the process do you engage them? And nobody really tells you these things. It's again one of those areas you're just, like so many areas of grad school, you're just expected to figure out on your own. I certainly didn't get it right the first times that I tried to do that. So don't expect you to either. So I want to give you guys some guidance on what's really helped my students develop a winning approach with their co-authors to get the most value out of them and the most investment into their success. So I am once again going to pull up our handy whiteboard tool just to map out a framework. And let me share my screen here. I was also wanted to just comment that I was so pleased to see so many of you recognize and place a high priority on publishing in the group. We just did a poll in the Facebook group, and when I asked you what your biggest goal is at the moment, the biggest responses were high impact publications and doing research that makes a difference. I'm really proud of a lot of the research topics that you have in the group, and I really like to see the commitment that many of you have to improving the public good. And I like that because when your passion's there, when your heart's in the right place, you're almost always going to do better. And that's one of the fundamental criteria you need for finding a winning topic, that you have that burning passion, that you really believe in what you're doing, that you're responding possibly to something that makes you angry. Okay, so let me give you my strategy here on how to leverage co-authors. So there are a couple points. So there are two things that we need to understand. We need to understand at what point in the research process to engage co-authors, and we need to understand, where exactly we want to engage different kinds of co-authors, and we also want to answer whether you even need a co-author. So let me write this out. So usually, if you break down the research process, you have different stages that are quite generic, right? So you have on one side here, you have conceptualizing the idea, which I'm just going to call idea here for short. And let me just make sure this screen is really sharing the way it's supposed to. 2 seconds. So you want to make sure that, yeah, okay, it is sharing. So you want to make sure that, so one is at the idea stage. The other stage you've got then is actually when you go through, say, and you have a hypothesis, maybe you're collecting data of some kind, collecting data. And then you have a stage that's the actual analysis. And then you have the write-up. And then you have the submission stage. Now, I hear a lot of different people who say, okay, well, I need a really famous co-author, or because when I submit, it won't even hear the submission, it won't even get sent out for review. Right? So some people really focus here, oh, I really need this for submission. I think that's a myth. And I say that from the interview we did with the executive editor of the top top 2 medical journal in the world, The Lancet. I say that in my experience as an editor of both social sciences and public health journals, that's really a myth. And in fact, it can be double-edged, because oftentimes when you get in bed with those co-authors, you get in bed with that reputation they have, and that can be good or bad. There are some people, there are long-standing disputes in the field, and you tether yourself to one side of that dispute. So it may not necessarily help you. Most of the journals are looking for, is this a good fit for the journal? Is it going to get citations? Because journals are in the citation game. So this idea of you just need the most famous co-author on your paper, I actually think can be counterproductive. It may be strategic for you if you want to get a recommendation letter down the road, but it is not an essential or indispensable ingredient for your paper when you submit it to actually getting looked at and getting taken seriously in the academic literature. The second thing I want you to understand when you think about the different stages here and your co-authors is I want you to understand where they are themselves in the academic hierarchy, right? And you've got some from who themselves are, say, PhD students to postdoc to assistant professor to associate, and we'll just say to full professor, because then they go into tenure roles over here to emeritus and retired, right? You might have some people outside the university, but most often, the vast majority of your co-authors are going to be inside the university. So one thing that I think is a big mistake that I see students make is trying to get support from faculty for the wrong thing. So if you take a full professor who's very busy and you try to get them to help you with data collection, um, odds are you're barking up the wrong tree. Why is this? One, they're likely going to be too busy. These people are very high value in the field. There's relatively few of them compared with the number of people at lower ends. The time's constrained, and this is actually probably not going to be as interesting to them, and probably not going to meet their priorities. And it's not even the max value that you could get from these high level. I mean, I would say for you high value contacts in your field, the higher value in terms of helping you, different people at these different points are going to help you in different ways. So if you needed help on the analysis, you might want to look to other PhDs or even postdocs on the analysis and collecting data side, the actual mechanics of doing the research. They've got more time, and they're also potentially likely to be more up to front with the latest and greatest in methods than sometimes the full professors, and especially emeritus, who get a stock of knowledge as grad students themselves that then decays and atrophies over time. So, where instead you might think about the value from say a full professor would be instead to help you, because they know the debates, they know the field, would be into generating high value ideas and perhaps helping you frame them to capture the debate in your introduction and in the top bits of your paper. So I would use your very high value experienced people in the field who may not have a whole lot of time. Don't necessarily bring them in here, but bring them in the idea generation stage. That's very important. Maybe in the latter stages of the write up, especially on the introduction that you got to frame correctly, get them involved there, and maybe to some extent, maybe in some extent, on interpreting the data, because that's going to help you create a story and craft a narrative, which is very, very important in your paper. You need to define a narrative. So you can kind of really see a big role of the full professor is really there in helping you define the narrative of your paper. And I would really encourage you to not bother them with as much. I mean, maybe you have a fantastic relationship with a professor. They've got tons of time on their hands. They can help you everywhere. But if on balance, they can help you anywhere, I would highlight those as critical stages. So let me try to create some space on this whiteboard again. Undoing all this. Let me come back. So as I've already hinted, the other thing that you might want is to engage with assistant professors. Now, assistant professors are often incredibly busy, and what they want to do is publish. So for them, they might be less equipped to come up with winning ideas, but you might be able to get help from them on the analysis and especially on the write-up. Because on the write-up side, they're starting to sniff, there's a publication here. That is what I need to do to get tenure. That is what I need to get ahead. And this is an area where engaging assistant professors, recognizing what they need to do to succeed, that you're going to best engage with them. They're going to tend to be relatively younger, more at the front of the field. And so I would strongly recommend these folks here and there. I do recommend, in terms of collecting data in general, I sometimes say Watson had Crick, but they can be very helpful for you to stay motivated to get a partner on projects and to go through some of the grind together, and maybe he or she helps you in yours, you help him or her on theirs, especially if you're in a related field. Just can keep you motivated, and when you start losing steam, momentum, you can keep the momentum going by passing on to them and vice versa. So I really do, it's something that I really work with the students in the fast track program, is to tap into the power of community. That if you're not getting a powerful community from your PhD or your grad studies, you're really missing out on one of the core values that you're supposed to be getting in grad school. You want to be part of a network of rising stars, of people in your field who are going to take the baton and be the next generation of leaders. At my stage as a full professor, it's incredibly important, whether in terms of publishing, knowing editors of lead journals, placing papers. There is an important network effect. So do encourage you to tap into the power of community. I saw that there was a question that came through, so I just want to come back on my screen and tap that for a second. So we have a question: how do you engage? Let's look up. How do you engage with research and researchers with specialties outside of your own? I think that's a really good question. It's one of the reasons I really am so enthusiastic about the Fast Track program, because it creates that interdisciplinary space that we have in this community. So one of the ways you can do that is through our exclusive Facebook group, where we have people who are actually who want to collaborate, are happy to be part of that network, and that's a great opportunity. And then, of course, my coaching students create that as well. On your campus in your university, you have options. There might be centers of activity, where departments might be traditional around, say, economics or political science. Centers might be much more interdisciplinary. And if you can join up and take part in those can often be a great opportunity to plug into an interdisciplinary community and space. We really are living in a changing world on research where there are more opportunities to plug in than ever before. So strongly encourage you to seek those out. And often one of the ways to get winning ideas is by marrying up methods or ideas in an adjacent field and bring into your own. That is often one of the best low-hanging fruit strategies you can do. I remember what I did is I brought power structure analysis from sociology into public health and did a series of papers on that, showing the role of elites in public health. And that was one of my very highly cited papers. One of the papers has well over 1,000 citations, done incredibly well. And it wasn't anything really that was a radical breakthrough. I just brought methods that were commonplace in one discipline that enabled me to break new ground in another discipline. So, really good question, and really glad that you asked that, because Aditya, it's not always that known how you can go about doing that. That's the other thing I wouldn't shy away from. And this comes back to what we were talking about in terms of engaging co-authors, is that once you are at a point where maybe you're coming up with ideas, this can be a great time to try to engage people outside your field. Um, in another time that could be a great time to engage people outside your field is where you're interpreting data, right, in the analysis stage. Unfortunately, at this point, you will have already executed your methods, but certainly in the idea generating stage, this is a great time if you can get into some of those interdisciplinary conversations. I would encourage you inside this Facebook group as well. If for example, you're looking for a computational methods person working in a space, would encourage you to post that, hey, you're looking for somebody who's interested in this, uh, and encourage you to get in a chat and tap that power community. Nehal, great to have you join us. And Mason, great to have you join us too. Really happy to have you in the group. So so I hope this gives you a little bit of clarity on my strategy for engaging with co-authors. And I often, with my top co-authors, I often like to tell myself I want to have, with my top co-authors who I know are incredibly busy in the field, I wanted to make it very easy for them to work with me. I wanted to make it, so that they never felt pestered, they never felt bothered when I'd come to them. They actually felt like I was lightening their load in bringing value to their lives. Because what happens is, so often as a professor, you have people coming to you as a mendicant saying, "Please, can you help me with this? Please, can you help me with that?" And it's such a breath of fresh air when somebody is organized, has a good idea, and comes to you wanting to help you. The experience is so rare. So I always try to go with say I like to have the paper in my mind be 90 to 95% complete before I engage some of the very, very top professors. And here, maybe they're full professors. And really, what would I do? I might, in the early stage, float the idea to them. I would go then execute the idea and come back to them in the last stages of write up, or maybe touch base briefly in the analysis stage. And that's been extremely effective for me. Hey, Maria, really great to have you join. Really, really glad you're with us today. Do pop in any questions, comments. We're just going through co-authors, and we covered conceptual frameworks just a moment ago. And we're going to get to a few questions about PhD applications that people have also posed in the group. So yeah, again, the principle here is you want to make it easy for your co-authors to work with you. You don't want to be the person like, oh man, not this person who's just such a mess. And every time they come, they don't know what they're doing. They're lost, or handing me this, steaming turd pile of a paper that I got to deal with. And I can tell you, some of the students I've worked with, they felt like they weren't getting support from their supervisors. We just had a great session with Gabriel, who turned around a broken relationship with the supervisor and is doing extremely well. But some of the students I've worked with have had difficult, broken relationships with their supervisors and felt like they weren't getting support at time. Make a few simple tweaks, clarify the research, show that it's a winning project and topic. And suddenly it's like those supervisors, especially those who are lower in the hierarchy, still trying to make a name for themselves. Suddenly it's like they came back from the dead. And they sprung into action, came to life, and said, "Oh, wait a second! This isn't me just pouring my time into a black hole that's going to produce nothing. This is a winning project, winning student, and just getting those steps." So several of my students have really been able to turn around relationships with their supervisors. And sometimes it's been just so little as being able to write effectively and communicate clearly the brilliant ideas those students had. Because those students hadn't been taught effectively how to communicate well in science, and that was really compromising their ability to get support they needed from faculty. And the sad reality is, the faculty, you live in a world where, as a grad student, you have to kind of fight for attention for these faculty. They're not just lined up waiting to help you. Even if you're in a top PhD program at a top institution, right, the numbers are such that you're still having to vie for attention from those faculty. And guys, go back and watch the Matthew Effect session that I did on how, why it is that students in top programs get unfair advantages. And one of the big reasons is they are able to get great input investment from their supervisors. Even if you're not at a top Ivy League institution, you can get that to win for you by using the effective strategies that we espouse and we promote in the Facebook group to help you get really good investment from your faculty and develop good mentors. We've got another question that came out in the group. Just want to come back and remind you here, if you haven't joined, those of you on LinkedIn, Facebook, there is just tremendous value from over 30 hours of free masterclass that you're going to find in the group, including strategies on how to find and leverage effective mentors, including our vested interest strategy, how to get top people in your field invested in your success. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about, we have some questions about both coming in the group, about both MPH and PhD applications. And we had some people who are applying for jobs. Now, actually, the principles in all of these are not really that dissimilar. That you really don't want to do what so many students do, is just write your application telling about how great you are and why you think they should take you. You actually want to start backwards and really get a deep understanding of the program you're applying to. You want to, in a way, instead of leading with yourself, you want to think about them and make it, when to the extent you can, to make it more about them. So that applies all the way through. If you're applying to faculty positions, right, many times you want to understand what they're looking for. What are their teaching needs going to be? What research gap are they trying to fill in their department? So for the UK, right, some of my students have been very effective in noting that they have papers that were going to help with research assessment exercises that were going to bring those departments money. And so all the faculty reviewing that application could see how they could personally benefit from having that person join their department. And so I really want you to really start with that principle in your mind of how can that department or that school benefit from having you there. The second thing you really want to show is that you know why that's the right fit for you. That you're not just machine gun firing everywhere, but this is grad school. This is a different level. It's not like undergrad. That you've done your due diligence, you've done your homework, and you know there's a good fit. The sad reality is about 1 in 3 students don't finish. So universities really want to make sure that you're going to see your investment in your education through, especially in doctoral programs if they're investing in you. So at the master's level, maybe less so, but especially at the doctoral level, you need to have already identified a supervisor, a potential supervisor who's going to take you under their wing and ideally not just be a supervisor, but start being a mentor to you. And that's something you need to really study and find out. There's a whole lot more on this in our applying to the PhD masterclass. But those are some of the core principles. So you want to make it about them and not you. You need to demonstrate that you are a good fit. That you know why you want to go to that program, and that you're already qualified what you're getting yourself into for that program. And then you really, maybe less so for the master's level, although it certainly wouldn't hurt, but especially for any higher level, you need to start building connections and already start trying to reach out and identify potential supervisors in that department that you're applying to. I know some of you too have asked some questions about developing a research proposal as part of that application. And that's where the tool we started the session with, the conceptual frameworks, are really going to help you. They're really going to help you get clarity in taking what often might start from a very broad set of interests that you have, maybe right gender inequality and education, and be able to take something that's so broad and hone in like a laser beam on what could be a winning topic that people are going to see, hey, this is feasible, this could get done, I'd like to work on that, this is going to be publishable and have impact in the field. So those are some of the main things that came through this week. We've got some time for question and answer. So I'm going to spin back over to you. Questions, comments. I hope this is all clear to you. I hope you can begin, those of you who are writing up your literature reviews or doing your analyses, start making your conceptual frameworks using DAGs if you haven't already. And definitely if you haven't already, you need to start yesterday. Those of you turning to publishing, let us know how you're engaging your co-authors, good things that have happened that have not happened. Those of you doing applications, rather than so many students, I want to make sure that you guys don't just, write some stuff up, what comes into your head and what you think they're going to like, but that you've really researched. Um, so, yeah, Lydian, I'm glad that that's helpful. Questions. Again, we got time. We got a little bit of time here. This is really your time to get the support that I've been passing on to my grad students who have done so well over the years, going on to get permanent jobs elsewhere. I have one coming here that follows up on Aditya's question a little bit earlier. So how do you meet co-authors outside the discipline and outside your university? That's a really good question. Well, right now, it's easier than ever before. There are many Zoom or online events, online conferences that you can take part in that have lower cost and barriers to entry than ever before, because you don't have to fly over to the conference. You don't have to pay massive registration fees. So if you know that, so one of the clearest ways to do so is, suppose there's a related field. Suppose, for example, let's go back to the example of power structure analysis. Suppose you don't know what that is, but you think that could be useful. Go find who some of the leading figures are, find where a conference is, or where they're going to be speaking, and participate, and have good questions ready. That is a site of kind of a forced interaction where you can get direct engagement with them. And often I've had many students very effectively get in touch with me. They impressed me by asking a good question in a session. And they had a clear line and reason for connecting with me afterwards. So that approach enables you to connect with anybody, anywhere in the world. If they're outside your institution, right, it's of course outside your institution, outside your discipline. Of course, that's a lot farther. If you think about the distance you have to that person, that's the farthest you can go. So you want to try to minimize the distance. So you have an automatic point of contact through some of those events. It can often be the case that you might be cold contacting them. Again, when they're so far removed, right? The farther they are removed, the harder it is that a cold contact is going to work. And any contact you do need to make with them, again, just like applying the BG, you really need to make it about them. Why are you getting in touch with this person? And the more you can make it about them, the more likely you are to get a response. You can also do some other routes. Try to get in the network. So maybe you know somebody who knows them. Maybe you have a second order connection that can introduce you. that can also be highly effective. But before you say go to meet co-authors outside the discipline, I want you to also think about the value of co-authors. So, there's some kind of old guard segments of the field that this would make no sense in the natural sciences, but it's more so in the humanities and the social sciences. Say, well, you need to have sole author publications. There's this view of the great person in history who knew everything. And I just don't think that's very true anymore in a highly multidisciplinary world that we're living in. Right? Nobody would stop and say with COVID that, oh no, well you shouldn't publish that paper with multiple co-authors. You need to do it slower and just do everything by yourself. Right? That just doesn't make sense when it comes to doing things with real world impact. And I hope you guys are all doing something that in theory could have a real world impact, whatever your field is. So I think you want to think about the value of your co-authors and help you engage. So when you want somebody outside your field, I want you to have a specific reason. Like if I said, okay, I think this power structure analysis could be really helpful here. I don't know how to do it. Maybe I want to link with this person because they have specialized skills that I don't have and that I need. So have a, I really would spin that back, Susan, to your very good question. To think also hard and have a genuine reason why them before you ever begin that approach. People, as Susan follows up here, says people would be open to talk after going to their session. Yeah, usually there are. There's usually a question and answer, and often they will remember you. I mean, I wouldn't say wait 2 months after and say, hey, by the way, I asked a question at your talk, but do try to follow up promptly or create a space to follow up so it does feel natural. And sometimes people won't answer back to you. That's okay. That's going to happen. But again, the more sincere and authentic your reason for getting in touch and engaging with them, the more likely they are to follow up with you. I've got another really good question coming in through here from Aditya. Oftentimes, the conversation around PhD revolves around specialization. At the moment, there is a focus on interdisciplinary research. How can a researcher balance the two? So that's a really good question. But sometimes what I've seen with some students is they really want to do interdisciplinary research, and especially if they're in the US and they have a committee, the committee might say, well, this isn't really political science, or this isn't really what our department does. And that's kind of telling me you don't have a great fit, you don't have the right kind of relationship with your supervisors in those departments. Because they're basically saying, yeah, this isn't my wheelhouse. I don't want to mess with this. So I really think you can sidestep this whole question or concern at all by making sure you connect with the right faculty inside the department that you want to go to. And if you do that, and if they're in your area, you're going to be fine. So I wouldn't get too lost in these theoretical notions of, oh, is it too interdisciplinary? Is it not? I want you to find people who are doing the kind of research that you really admire and you want to do more of and learn from them, because it's really, at the end of the day, an apprentice system that you can't learn things just from the book at a grad level. At a grad level, you're making that transition from you could consume information from the book, but now you're turning into the ones who are going to write the book. You are going from a passive consumer of information to producing it. So you want to go find who's producing what you really like and what you admire, and you want to learn from, and figure out who that is, who can connect you with the skills and resources to get you there. And whether that is highly narrow and specialized or interdisciplinary, really that's going to depend on who you find. So I really appreciate you asking that question, Aditya. But my answer is a little bit to sidestep it, because you can really start feeling lost whether you get the balance right between specializing or interdisciplinary. The only last comment I want to make on that is your PhD is a critical time to invest in your skills. Like I mentioned before, in co-authors, the full professor skills will atrophy. I can still teach my students a few tricks here or there using R, its data, and other data visualization tools. But the reality is, right, that the stock of knowledge that you get in grad school, you're going to need to use for much of your career. And as you go further on in your career, your time shrinks, and it's harder and harder to put new tools in your kit. So I would love to go master Python and some data scraping tools. The reality is I'm not going to have the 400 hours that I need to become very good at it, to have that proficiency. I'm probably just going to hire somebody in my research team to do that. So do use the time wisely to make sure you get that stock of skills and knowledge that can potentially endure the rest of your career. Yeah, guys, questions. I mean, do you feel like you're getting the skills and support you need in your graduate programs? Are you having some trouble balancing specialization and the focus on interdisciplinary research that a lot of funders really emphasize? Let us know in the comments. I'm just tweaking here. So we do have a little bit more time. I'm just checking the different streams. See if we have some additional comments, questions. We have a little bit of time left. Again, this is really your time to take advantage of support and get questions that you have, things you're worried about, things you're struggling with, answered. We are going to be going in future weeks to a range of different topics where we go in depth on areas you're struggling with, whether that's writing or data visualization, especially around finding topics and publishing. We'll come back to that, but these grad clinics are really an open session for you guys to get that extra support. I say one of you asked about the MPH specifically at Harvard. One thing you've got to really do is go check the department for the deadlines, and I would encourage you to talk to existing students and call up the admissions at the department. Figure out what things work, what things don't work. And they're often happy to share those kinds of clues. I mean, ideally, some students are in. If you find them, you can easily find them on LinkedIn. Sometimes they're even willing to share their applications with you. And at Fast Track, we have a big library of successful applications from different departments that we also share that students can model on. Nahal asked a really good question here. I think exploring the right PhD post is challenging and needs the right guidance. 100%. I mean, just so many people I see get in a PhD program and only a year in realize it's not a good fit. They're not getting what they need. Their supervisors aren't responding. And then you're really in a tough spot because do you bail and just miss out on all that investment you just made? Do you try to turn it around? So much of this pain and frustration could be avoided with the right guidance at the beginning. So really glad you mentioned that, Nahal, before really trying to dive in too soon to the PhD. And you've got time. I mean, for those of you who are applying in December, January, that's just a couple months. There's a lot to do, but you really want to kick into gear now and use that time wisely. Aditya follows up here. The conflict between specialization and interdisciplinary research tends to take place in the job market. I've experienced that from time to time during interviews in India. Yeah, so look, there's a difference in kind of the what you've done and then how you want to package yourself in your cover letter. Right? When you put yourself out in a cover letter for a job, you can create a neat, tidy biography that fits with whatever that institution is looking for. And I definitely do this with my students who are going on the job market. I know, for example, right, somebody's applying to Edinburgh and they want somebody who is really strong on, say, understanding social movements. Well, that's what we're going to highlight front and center in the application. We're going to carve it up and make it look like that's the most important thing to that person and that they can fulfill and bring to that department because that's where their needs are. So in India, it's a lot's going to depend on the department. And in some Indian universities, there's not as much weight as I think there should be on international high impact publications. So really, there is a great deal of variation, and that's why you've got to get to know your institution and specifically what they're looking for And ideally, those individuals inside the institution, if they're in your corner, they will help you navigate those tricky waters that sometimes you just can't see from the outside. Try as hard as you might, exploring the websites, exploring what faculty are doing and publishing. So yeah, do Aditya. I would really strongly encourage you to get into those conversations. Um, so yeah, guys, these are really good questions coming through. I'm just checking the other socials here. Yeah, and Nehal, just coming back to you for a second, I would really encourage you to using some of the tools. If you don't have it already, I'll send it to you. But use the tools that are covered in that applying to the PhD masterclass that we did about a month ago, including an Excel spreadsheet to really help you stay organized, to rank order for yourself what for you are the best PhD institutions, who are some contacts in those institutions, and already begin a process of reaching out to them and building those connections. And I know you've worked on a really nice paper that can be a hook and an entry point into that conversation. It shows that you're serious about research, that you've got a publishable paper, and by being strategic with choosing co-authors on it, that may also crack open some doors to universities for you. So yeah, I do think yeah, great. Happy to hear that. This process can be very overwhelming. So something as simple as an Excel spreadsheet to keep track of the many institutions, who are the key people in it. This is pretty useful when you're dealing with 10, 15, possibly 20 institutions. I mean, I remember when I was applying for postdocs, I put in well over 40 applications. And it was a massive undertaking to stay organized, customize, and tailor those applications to those different institutions. Um, so 100% Nehal. Okay, guys, I think if we don't have any other burning questions, we are coming to a good place to stop for today. Just scanning one last time through the socials. Again, if there's trainings that would be particularly helpful to you, we've done a range of things from effective writing through to getting the most out of reference managers, through to seeing more deeply, seeing patterns in data that other people can't. Do pop that below in the comments, and I'll be sure to prepare a training that you're going to find personally helpful. Do invite others to the group too. I always appreciate that because that helps me serve grads who might not otherwise benefit, who maybe aren't getting the support that they need when they could, inside this community, take advantage of a wealth of free resources that have helped my students and help people in this group get amazing results 100% free. Of course, for those of you who do want to go deeper, who are looking for maybe a little more guidance, maybe you're feeling good, but you'd like to have a professor in your corner who's been there, done it all before, do take advantage of booking a one-to-one accelerator session with me. I like to get to know everybody in the group, not least just to connect you with the right resources, but we could also see if you're a potential fit for some of our more advanced programs. With that, guys, have a great weekend, everyone. Make sure you take a very activating break. I know I'm going to go for a walk in the forest if I'm looking outside. If it doesn't rain too much, I'm currently in Denmark at the moment, so we're getting bits of sun on and off. But I do hope you guys do manage to do something that leaves you feeling refreshed, ready to go, set your intention for next week. All right. Look forward to seeing you same time as always next Friday here at Fast Track. Bye for now.